Welcome back, everybody. Well, as ISIS continues with its terror campaign, it's also attracting more people to its slick recruitment efforts. There are growing concerns that if the U.S. doesn't lay out a clear strategy to defeat ISIS, the situation will only get worse. Our next guest knows firsthand how radical Islam networks operate and once served as a top recruiter setting up radical groups in Pakistan, Denmark, and Egypt until his arrest in the aftermath of 9/11. After spending time with hardcore violent radicals in prison, Maajid Nawaz realized his enchantment with their ideology was wrong and renounced all ties to radical Islam. He documents his story in his book, Radical, My Journey Out of Extremism. Nawaz now heads an anti-terror think tank and is running for a seat in the British Parliament. Recently, he shared his concerns with me about what he calls the U.S. undefined passive response against ISIS and his reaction to the Houthi takeover in Yemen.
Well, I think we do have to be concerned about the fact that if the U.S. appears as if it's in retreat across the region, and if the foreign policy of the United States appears as if it's not addressing the issues, but rather is actually pulling back from the area, then of course ISIL will be able to use such decisions for their own propaganda that they are somehow defeating the United States.
When you take a look at what's at play right now, give us a sense of these young men who, and some women, of course, who are joining ISIS right now. What are the common denominators?
I think obviously they are from Sunni regions. When we look at the situation in Iraq and Syria, there are probably different reasons to why Iraqi fighters join ISIL, to why Syrian fighters would join, and then thirdly why foreign fighters from across the world would join. The most hardened activists are the foreign fighters, those who travel from Europe, those who travel from Central Asia, from South Asia, from across Muslim majority nations, particularly Tunisia actually, and North Africa. Muslim majority nations, fighters travel from there who are committed jihadist ideologues. And these are the ones who in Syria take positions of responsibility in ISIL's hierarchy and are by and large the ones who are enforcing their very, very rigid interpretation of the faith, of Islam, over the rest of society. The Sunni Arabs who are joining in Iraq are primarily joining as a form of discontent against the corruption and the ineptitude of the Shia-led Iraqi administration and its failure, frankly, to integrate the Sunnis of the north.
What impact does it have, for example, when the enemy hears directly from our president saying what he's not going to do, like sending in the ground forces?
I argue that the threat here is very clearly Islamist extremism, and if we recognize that it's not just a small organized fringe, but rather there's an ideological insurgency across certain countries within the region, then that helps us to recognize which ideology in particular we have to blunt. And here it is, the Islamist ideology. And that's not the same as the religion, but it is somehow justified by the religion in the eyes of those who follow it. And then beyond that, I think there needs to be a wider strategy to deal with this across the region. And what I fear is that currently President Obama not only hasn't named the ideology, but has admitted to not having a strategy. And I think we need to have a bit more leadership in the long term in dealing with what is a global jihadist insurgency.
So many military leaders, for example, have said have expressed similar thoughts like you are right now, saying that you have to name the enemy, and without doing so, you really cannot win.
If we are so scared of naming the Islamist ideology as the motivating factor for many of these foreign fighters, then we aid that atmosphere of hysteria where people are frankly, they're just petrified, and that can lead to even more anti-Muslim hate crime, because if they don't know that, if they're unable to pinpoint specifically that we're dealing with the Islamist ideology, in their ignorance they blame all Muslims, and of course then all Muslims face a backlash. So I think it's actually it's better, if we wish to protect mainstream Muslims from anti-Muslim hate crime, to name the very specific ideology we're talking about, which is Islamism, and distinguish that from Islam, the faith.
Doesn't that have to also come from people within the Muslim community as well?
Absolutely. Everyone has a role to play. All of society is affected by terrorism. When a bomb goes off, it doesn't discriminate. Likewise, all of society must respond. And frankly, at the moment, I see that many people across the board in society are stepping up to challenge this ideology, to challenge bigotry. And unfortunately, I don't think that my own communities are doing enough, and I think they should be far more vocal. Things can spiral out of control very, very quickly. We saw that post-Arab uprisings, and what I'm really worried about at the moment is we have a complete breakdown of law and order in ISIL-controlled territories, and sort of lynchings, public beheadings, and all sorts of atrocities that remind us of a medieval era, parading prisoners in public and burning them alive. What I fear is that Libya and other certain areas in North African Muslim-majority countries, such as the Sinai region of Egypt, have very strong ISIL affiliates. And in large parts of Libya, there's a very grave concern that we're going to witness a similar breakdown of law and order and a return to medievalism. And that's what I'm really worried about, is a spread of the ISIL-style jihadist barbarism like a virus across regions post-Arab uprisings where people are frankly discontented and upset with the status quo, and they're resorting to this form of atrocious manipulation of the religion of Islam to express themselves.